Welcome to No Clip, the podcast that's like a book club for people who don't think that books reward them enough for being good at them. I'm Chad Rutherman.
And I'm Andy Kinnick.
And today, we're going to be talking about Lunacid, a game that was developed and published by Kira LLC and released in 2023 on Windows.
But first, if you can give us a like or a rating, it would be greatly appreciated.
All right, now Lunacid is... I'm actually just going to go ahead and... I'm just going to pull the store page up right now. Because they say that the game that was inspired by old FromSoft games like Shadow Tower and Kingsfield. And I think that is important to note. Kingsfield obviously is the one that I am familiar with. Mm-hmm. Shadow Tower I had literally never heard of.
Me neither, but from what I've heard, it's more similar to that than Kingsfield.
Gotcha. But from what I know about Kingsfield, this is still reasonably similar to that as well, in terms of genre. So you are looking at a game that is a fantasy kind of, sort of, we'll talk about that probably pretty shortly. Dungeon crawling, first person exploration focused game. And it's an interesting game, and one that I'm excited to talk about, but I do feel the need to be like, also, by the way, I have not played Kingsfield
right,
or Shadow Tower. Like, there are certain elements of this game that we may criticize or say are really cool and unique that come from Kingsfield, and that is like the explanation for them. Mm-hmm. But we will not know that.
Right.
So
yeah, I never played any dungeon crawlers growing up, but like it's a genre I've been interested in trying for a long time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, especially this style where, and I say this style as if like every dungeon crawler is going to be like this. This game, the genre of game that I would put this into is good game.
It does feel like in that lineage of like Zelda, where it's like very focused on like exploration, like making your way through a world.
Yeah, and to me, what that speaks to in my experiences is like this game feels like Dark Souls, like it is inspired by other FromSoftware games, and obviously the game it comes from a post Dark Souls era, and not only with like, this is a bit of a tangent, just bear with me, direct references to things in Dark Souls, like the names of stuff, and even like more oblique references, like there's a character's name is like Ashley the Witch, who is like a Witch of Izalith analog who like over time progressively made more and more complex pyromancy spells. Or Cheryl the Crow, which is obviously a reference to Eileen the Crow, and also to Cheryl Crow. Which, like, there are jokes that, like in Danganronpa V3 Killing Harmony, where they make the, like, fuck the Patriots joke, where you see it and you say, like, in 2 years' time, that joke is going to be really stupid.
I don't know. I think that one holds up.
Okay, yeah. I mean, in 2024, still fuck the Patriots. I say, knowing nothing about football whatsoever. But when your point of reference is Cheryl Crow in 2023, I feel like your joke is just already stupid. Like, it's stupid in a way that I find funny. Yeah, so it works.
It's like the Melrose Place joke from Shadows Over Loathing. No, I actually am glad you brought this up because I had notes on it too. I wanted to talk about just kind of like the line between like inspiration, homage, and like ripping off a little bit, because like
this is an important seed conversation for the next episode we're gonna do. So if you're following along with us, keep this conversation we're about to have in mind as we go into the next episode.
Like, because like I like certain things, like some subtle references and things, but like I think it's kind of weird when like you just have the Moonlight Greatsword in the game. It's just the weapon from Dark Souls, and then the ending is exactly the ending of Demon Souls. So I don't know, I think that kind of stuff is a little bit like over the line in my book. Like, I don't know, I do something different.
I want to say that I agree with you, except on the Moonlight Greatsword. I would be upset if the Moonlight Greatsword was not in this game, because it is a game about the moon.
I guess.
And the moon is what is like the instigating factor of all of this, and it is inspired by Kingsfield, which is the game that the Moonlight Greatsword first showed up in. Like,
Sure.
if you want to make a game that is like within the FromSoft canon, I feel like the Moonlight Greatsword belongs in this game. But
I think
I think that could be a difference of opinion. Like,
Yeah,
I
yeah.
liked fucking Death Stranding using actors' faces,
Right.
a thing that you absolutely despise. And I feel like there's some similarity in there.
I guess. It's just like, I don't know. In my opinion, like, make your own cool thing. Like, that maybe will inspire other people to want to put that in their game. I
mean,
know.
that's
do something
fair.
original.
But I think that the game does do well. I think the game does a lot of stuff that is original.
Yeah. It's not like
the game might be a 1-to-1 ripoff of Shadow Tower, and I would not know this.
Yeah, it's not like pervasive over the whole game. It's just like a few specific things.
Yeah, but I see where you're coming from. Like, I levy it as a criticism. I don't remember if it was on this podcast, but in life, I've levied a criticism against Dark Souls 3 for being a little bit too, like, nudge, nudge. Have you played Dark Souls 1?
Mm-hmm.
Like, it just constantly refers back, and I think it takes away from the viability of Dark Souls 3 as a sequel. And sound off in the Dark Souls channel in the Discord if you have issue with that. But in this game, because it is like an indie developed game, and it's such a an obvious and intentional homage, I feel like I'm slightly more accepting of it. Like, I don't feel like any of it took away from the experience of playing this game the way that wandering into Anor Londo does in Dark Souls 3. But I don't know. I don't know how to categorize it.
Yeah. I don't want to like make a mountain out of a molehill or anything, but like I would almost, it's a weird comparison to make, but almost make the comparison to God of War, like the reboot, where it's like they went most of the game with a new cool weapon. I was like, oh, like a new iconic thing to this reboot. And then they're like, oh, but also the Blades of Chaos, here they are. Or it's like, it didn't need those things. Like, it was doing fine on its own. And it feels like it cheapens itself a little bit in my book by putting the things from another game blatantly into it.
Yeah, I mean, that I can agree with, I think. Like, I believe that doing its own thing 100% of the time probably would have been better. But also at the same time, like, I feel like it almost walks a line in terms of like being dishonest with itself. Like, how closely do you have to be, like, because Sex Henderson and the boys over at the asylum didn't literally put drifting into Atlantic Rim, their game that is an obvious their movie that is an obvious ripoff of Pacific Rim. Does that make Pacific Rim more artistically complete than Lunacid because it includes like things that are directly taken from their source material? I don't think I'm qualified to make that call. But all I know is that Atlantic Rim is a bad movie and Lunacid is a good game. I know what tangentially related, I'll say. I want to talk a bit about actually, to close out on that though, I do want to say that this game feels different enough from what it is emulating that I feel like it has more of a license to get away with what it takes.
Yeah, especially because it's like an indie project made by one person as well.
Right. Yeah, it feels like that is the it feels slightly different than Lies of P, which we're going to talk about next time, which also a game that I like. Spoilers for the next episode, but one that has a different sort of like vibe to the way that it's set up. But tangentially related to sort of like the Moonlight Greatsword and things like that. I found one of potentially the most interesting things to my brain, but maybe less impactful than it deserves the amount of mental energy that I put into it. This game is a fantasy game in the sense that there is magic and swords and shields. But it is set in potentially like an alternate future 1990s, or I guess like a present day where technology stopped after like the whole moon thing. How do you feel about that, and like how they implemented the setting into the game and like its sort of themes and shit?
I feel like there's some of it that I just went over my head. Like, I never really figured out the whole VHS tape thing. Like, I found one, never found anything to do with it. And I think like the achievement for getting is called like, you know what's going on here, don't you? Or something like that. And I was like, I sure don't.
The achievement is called "You're in the Know."
Oh,
right?
yeah.
Which is in fact a direct reference to one of the stock messages you can leave in Bloodborne.
Oh, okay.
Just for one other thing that they pulled wholesale from a FromSoftware game.
But anyway, yeah. So I didn't know what was going on with that. But I like this as a dark fantasy setting like a lot. I think especially at the beginning. Like where all the areas like loop back to the well that you've been thrown down. Like I think that's really cool, and it's gets more abstract as it goes, and you know you end up in like a blood lake at the bottom in a castle and etc. So I thought it had like a nice variety, and I liked how it incorporated some like more surreal and more like horror adjacent things in there. I was all about it.
Yeah. I think watching the intro cinematic for this game immediately made me wet my pants. I was just like so amused by everything that was going on with it. Like it was so wild and cool, and I was sucked in instantaneously. And then they sort of drop you in, and it feels much more traditional. Like you're fighting snails with a rusty sword at the beginning of this game. So it's got this weird setup where even like on the home screen is like the main menu screen is like a modern parking lot, essentially, with like a VHS tape and I believe a corpse and some birds.
Yeah, crows. And I think there's like a pile of VHS tapes.
Yeah. There's it's like a weird tonal difference between what you see when you boot the game up and what you see immediately after loading in. And I found it really interesting. And like, I like the way that like, so the first time I thought about this was in not the catacombs, above the catacombs, the accursed tomb, I believe.
Oh, yeah.
You get a spell that's called lightning. And if you look at the spell, lightning is classified as light magic. And I've thought about that. I was like, light magic typically, I'm thinking in like the Kingdom Hearts sense, right? Like it is a beam of like light energy.
Yeah, like a cleric spell or whatever.
Exactly, yeah. Like a holy spell. But in the context of this game, which is like a society that developed under the well with only the remnants of the technology of the world above, lightning being electricity is essentially magic to them. And so like the lightning spell being classified as a light, and then there are only a few places where there's like actual functioning electricity, was like an interesting world building moment for me. And it's just like kind of a small example, but goes to why I really like the setting a lot, because it allows for both the dark fantasy elements and also the like more modern, yes, very surreal, very cosmic, sort of like bizarre parts of the game that are extremely cool.
Yeah, yeah. It's like you get that part of like a ruined world that you find pieces of, but like that ruined world is our world.
Right.
So it does
yeah.
make for an interesting flavor. Like there's a secret room in the vampire castle that just has like a projector that's like showing footage of a beach. Is there anything to do in that room? I never figured anything out.
Yeah, so for context, or from context rather, I've pieced together that you did not find the tube television in the catacombs.
No.
Because that was your one missing piece, essentially.
Okay.
There's a tube TV in the catacombs that you take the original VHS to that shows you to go to a place in the sewer and shoot a spot on a wall with a projectile to get a key, which then lets you get the white VHS tape, which you then take to that projector.
Okay.
And I did this, and it's the achievement, you're in the know, right? No, I am not in the know. It made very little sense to me after.
Yeah, I can't believe I didn't find that TV. I feel like I spent so much time in the catacombs.
Oh, a huge amount of my playtime was spent in the catacombs because it is
Yeah.
just so hard to get around it.
But before we get
yeah.
off of this topic, this game has like video filters as well that mimic like 90s era kind of aesthetics, and one of them is vaporwave, which I think is interesting because it adds to that like 90s nostalgia thing that the game does have going on under the surface. So I feel like there's more to that than either of us picked up on.
Yeah, this is a game. When I first found, I'm not the discoverer of Lunacid. When my attention was brought to the game originally, I thought this would be like a decent pocket game that we could do. And after having played it and completed the game, I wish I had even more time with it before we did the podcast and we took more time. Notably, this is a late episode, and I still wish that I could go in more. In fact, there's a full moon coming up on Monday, and I only fucking know that because of this game. And I think that there is like a lot more that I could dive into, like even with what I have in the game right now. Like if I went through and just read the descriptions of all the weapons and spells that I have, I could probably piece together some additional notes about the setting and the time frame and everything else that's happening, because it is all very interesting. And they do a good job of making everything feel sort of mysterious. And I'm debating whether to use that to go into talking about the game sort of like exploration, but that real sense of mystery is something that I haven't seen in a really long time, and makes me think of games that we did a while ago for the podcast. I think both Tamashi and Fatum Beychla strive for a similar feeling, but don't pull it off as well as Lunacid does.
Yeah, it made me think of things like Tunic or Hollow Knight. I
should have thought of Tunic.
Yeah, or even like the original Dark Souls. Like, I feel like they're games that like harken back to like this feeling older games gave you, like this kind of like mysteriousness or this crypticness to them. Like there was like some kind of weird mystery to crack about it. Like there was something under the surface. And that's a hard thing to modernize because like at the time people remember it fondly in retrospect, but like oftentimes stuff like that's frustrating, or, like you were a kid and you didn't care at the time. And it's like you have to try and evoke that feeling in people. So it's like interesting to see how different games do it. And I think, like trying to do some things like that are unique. Like this game does like weird things like with its spells and stats that can let you find secrets. So like you feel like you earned it, or like almost like you're exploiting the game a little. which also adds to that like old game feeling, where you don't know if you're doing what you're supposed to be doing, and it makes things feel more secret.
Yeah. And that's a really good point. Like, I think that the game intentionally wants to make you feel like you are sort of like overcoming the systems rather than them being intentional solutions to puzzles a lot of the time. Not necessarily because of like, you know, jumping real high or whatever. It's more like the fact that they don't put hard limits on a lot of the things you can do means that you get to experiment more and try more things. And yes, the solution 90% of the time is to stack up a bunch of coffins, but you do get that experience of being able to sort of like work around it, you know, and find problems and be able to puzzle out the solutions in a way that like the game just doesn't give you clues for.
Nope.
Like way more so than in a lot of other games that have the same like explicit goals.
Yeah, like I spent a lot of time trying to find the last furnace thing to light up the catacombs, and eventually just gave up and looked up where it was, and it was like, oh, you have to like go to this wall, this completely inconspicuous wall that you would never think twice about, and then stack up some coffin. You found this spell down in the catacombs probably called Coffin, and you probably didn't look at it because you have like 30 spells, and you can stack up, you know, summon a coffin, have it like lean against the wall and use it as a ramp, and it's like up there. And I was like, oh. It was like, I wish that, like, because like I almost felt like I was disincentivized from experimenting with the spells, because I feel like the first couple were just like offensive spells that weren't very interesting. So I was just like, this one's good, that one's good, I'll just stick with these, and like just kind of ignored them for a while. And then after I learned that by looking it up, I was like looking at every fucking thing I've got to see what it did. So like it would have been nice if it could have like somehow like tried to organically nudge you towards like paying attention to what you were picking up. Like there's the thing later in the vampire castle where you come across like a room that's just like a big block of ice, and I immediately was like, oh, I have a fire spell, I bet I can melt that. Like something like that earlier in the game, because the fire spell is one of the first ones you get, would have gotten me like thinking that way, and maybe I would have figured out the coffin thing on my own.
Right. So I do, when I got that, I did not have coffin. I don't know how much time, how long have we been going on this half right now?
25 minutes.
Yeah, I guess just baseline. I want to talk about some things and remind me when we start the second half. I want to come back and say like the start of this game, what our first experiences were. Because I do want to use this moment to talk about the exploration and
right.
sort of finding stuff. But I want to say up front, because I have to, there's like a whole spiel that goes into my explanation for this, is I had heard, one of the things that I knew about the game before I ever played it was that there was some wackiness going on with the magic system. And that there was something strange about it, or like the mechanics behind them are weird and interesting. And I said to myself, well, I don't want to pick the same class that Andy picked, and what if he picks the magic class? And then I chuckled to myself and I went on with my business, because I knew that you weren't going to pick the magic class.
Yeah. That's like maybe a third playthrough. I'll pick a magic wielding character.
That sounds about right. Yeah, like, you'll have to get a couple of games in first, and then so I started as the witch, and I started pumping intelligence, because that's what you do on a magic class, and I did this for a while, and was building up my magic. And as I was looking at the stats and what they did, like magic increases the damage that your spells do, it increases the amount of MP that you have, and it increases the speed at which spells charge, which is a huge number of really beneficial things for one stat to do. And so I was looking at my stat spread, and it was like 4, 5, 6, 45. And I was like, should I diversify a bit? And one thing I'll get into later was I felt like I was running away from stuff a lot because I didn't have the MP and I didn't want to use the consumables to restore it in order to take fights effectively. So I was like, I'll start putting points into dex so I can use this bow as like a thing. And we'll talk more about this in the second half, but basically I accidentally, because I also ran into situations where I had to use Google to find things. I accidentally made the most overpowered build in the game, and everyone agrees. And there's no contest, apparently. I didn't know I was doing that. And believe me if you want, I don't really care. But when I came to that hole in the wall, I just jumped up there. Because I had a high enough dex
that makes so much sense.
Yeah, you could just jump up into the holes in the wall. And it's crazy how strong jumping really high is in this game.
Yeah, no, I was like, when I read that, I was like, dex makes your jump go higher. I was like, well, this is so Chad. Like, he's gonna have like a maxed out dex stat.
Yep. I mean, at the end of the game, my stats were like 4, 5, and then it was like 50, 100, and then like 20 on resistance.
Yeah.
Like I had like 20 resistance, 100 intelligence, and then 50 or 60 dex, just so that I could like leap tall buildings in a single bound. And the ranged weapons are kind of interesting, but I will say they're my least favorite part of this playthrough that I did. So, yeah, so that was basically the whole deal. Like, because I invested heavily into magic and into jumping high, it means that I was able to do a lot of the exploration stuff quite easily, like shockingly easily. And it smoothed it a bit, but I think that we have to talk about fake walls and their implementation in this game, because I don't think to me were not it as far as like making the game work the way that it wants to. And I don't know how you feel about them.
I don't know. I felt like they were implemented like decently well. Like, it's always a difficult thing, like how much of a giveaway do you give if you do any at all for a secret wall. And I feel like the little question mark that comes up in the corner of the screen is like a decent one because it's like a clear indicator, but there's often times where you can just run right past it and not notice it. So I don't know. I feel like it's a real middle of the road solution, but one that, especially like, you can pump your speed up pretty fast, so it can make it harder to notice them. But I don't know. Like, I found a lot of them, so like it is kind of easy, but I don't know. So I guess middle of the road about it.
I don't disagree with that take necessarily. I think that I wish that there were other ways of gating areas aside from them, because it's one of those things where it's like the layout of the area makes a lot of difference as to how if you're gonna find them. Like, there's a lot of times when I would find a hidden wall because there was almost no option for me not to find it. Like, they put them in a narrow hallway where you're always gonna see the prompt come up, or you're in an area like the woods and you're not going to be walking along by the walls to check for hidden walls the whole time. And so it kind of like, to me, it was like I felt like it was pulling me to do things that didn't seem fun, to look for more fun things. Though I do appreciate like what they're trying to do, because the hidden walls do the thing that everybody praises Dark Souls for doing, which is taking content in the game and hiding it in a way that a lot of people won't ever even see it. And in a way that makes it like feel rewarding when you find them. rarely you'll open a wall and it'll have like a health potion, which is a meaningful and good reward.
Right.
But a lot of the time you open up a wall and it's a whole ass path, like it's a shortcut back somewhere else, or it takes you to a corpse in golden armor that's nailed to a floor, or it takes you into an entire dungeon that you didn't know existed.
Or the reverse of that, which is what happened to me. I found that hidden wall after finding the golden armor, and it was like, oh, a secret shortcut back to the crystal. So it's like, depending on which way you go, it's like a different cool thing to find. So it works both ways.
Exactly. Yeah. And it's cool on both sides. You gotta get like, yeah, I don't know. Most of the hidden walls felt like finding them was a very significant thing. And so I felt like just sort of the act of finding them was cool. And I think that they used the hidden walls in a cool way to hide very meaningful secrets. But also at the same time, it just feels like it does pressure you to spend a lot of time in areas with nothing really there to entertain you, just walking along walls looking for secrets.
Yeah, I think that's kind of like a player psychology kind of thing. Like, do you take that type of player that's going to like walk along all the walls, like beating their head against them to find the secrets into account, or the like more average player who's gonna like see a wall that looks suspicious and check it out, but then otherwise not think about it?
Right. And I wanted to say, like, but some of the hidden walls are absolutely necessary to complete the game. But now that I'm thinking back on it, I have no fucking idea if that is true at all.
I don't think it is.
I mean, I know it is in the last area.
Oh, yeah.
The arena, you have to get a few secret walls in order. No, I might be lying.
The arena
you might not.
Is behind a secret wall. The Abyss Tower or whatever. Oh, no. The arena, you mean like the
Forlorn Arena.
Yeah,
like
that one. Okay.
The last two dungeons before the final boss.
The lava area might be behind a hidden wall.
Yeah, I don't think the lava area is required to complete the game.
No, maybe it is. I felt like it was.
Because there's a few areas like the Tower of Abyss, the Boiling Grotto, which is
there you go.
The Forsaken Archive, Forbidden Archive.
I never found the library.
I found that literally right before I quit playing.
Yeah.
And by quit playing, I mean beat the game. I, in fact, was about to boot the game up earlier, but got called in to do something.
Yeah. Much like you, I wanted to spend more time on the game, but felt like I needed to move on to both Lies of P and Final Fantasy VII Rebirth.
Oh, yeah, of course.
Too many other things vying for my time right now.
Yeah, and I don't blame you, and I also feel the same way. But also just like, I was actually kind of disappointed. I think we're wrapping up for now and are going to head into the second half shortly. But I, just as a spoiler, I guess, on my overall feelings on this, when I sat down today, I was like, oh man, Lies of P is a game that I'm playing on a console in a different room, which means that when I'm at my computer, I can play more Lunacid and try and unlock some of the secrets I'm missing. And then I was like, God damn it, Pseudo Regalia is on PC, so I should be playing that. So yeah, like that is sort of the point where I'm at, where it's just like and it took me a bit to get there, which we'll get into, but like I did like the secret walls, as much as I complain about having to stare at walls for a long time looking for stuff, did compel me and still compel me and whisper to me in my brain and tell me that I need to play more Lunacid to try and find all the stuff that I didn't find naturally. So they do work, but they work in a way that I am lukewarm about.
Yeah. And I guess just to throw it in, I guess to round out the first half, there's like a degree of like non-linearity to the game. Because, like, I noticed, like, I checked your achievements, like, after I've been playing the game for a bit. And, like, you got the achievement for getting to, like, I don't remember if it's called, like, the something cistern or, like, you can get to it from the, like, second area where all the...
From the Temple of Silence?
Yeah, you can get to it from there.
The fetid mire?
Yeah, the fetid mire. You had that achievement after playing it for, like, an hour and a half or something. And it's like, I went from the second area to the forest, and then from the forest to the catacombs, and then, which made that area super hard because I had no crystal for it. I didn't get to the checkpoint till I got to the end of the level rather than the beginning, and then got to the swamp lake, or I mean the Lake of Blood or whatever, then went all the way across it and found the fetid mire. I was like, oh, this feels like a baby connecting zone. Like, I feel like this is like the quote intended place to go after the second area, and I just didn't find it till like 7 hours into the game.
Right. Like, I did notice this because your achievements show up. Like, when you're on Steam, if people who are listening to this podcast for some reason have not used Steam, the most ubiquitous, possibly to a problematic extent, launcher of video games for the last 20 years of existence, it when you select a game, it shows like your friends like recent activity in the game, and no fucking buddy else is playing Lunacid, so all I see is Andy, and I'm like, I did this game in the reverse order to Andy because I went like I didn't find the forest for the trees, and for terrible joke, for many hours after I went from the start through the Temple of Silence to the fetid mire to the Sanguine Sea to the castle,
right?
And did a bunch of that stuff before ever coming back and finding the forest. Like, the forest was very late in my playthrough.
I couldn't. It took me maybe an embarrassingly long time to figure out the blood magic puzzle to get into the castle. I kept like waiting to find some kind of key to open the door. So yeah, I went everywhere else. I went and fought the demon in the lake and all that shit.
Right.
But yeah, it made it so I got the elfin bow really early, and it was like fucking incredible. For a large portion of the game.
Yeah, I also used as we'll talk about this in the second half early, but I, being me, use like a million weapons because I'm like that. But yeah, I do remember the elfin bow being pretty fucking rad. I do want to ask, I think, kind of to round out this conversation, like, yes, there is non-linearity to the game, and yes, it has a lot of focus on finding hidden things. Did you ever find yourself frustrated at the just complete lack of direction and the number of things that appeared to just dead end without like giving you any clues as to where to go next? If you couldn't tell by my wording
that I did. No, I feel like it always was like verging on that, but never quite got there. Like, there was a point where I was running around the catacombs where I think it did get there, but that was like the only point for me because like I couldn't figure out the castle, and then I kept going back to the catacombs and being like, do I have to light this last furnace? I can't fucking find it. But that was really the only point where the game got like that for me.
Yeah, there's something to be said about Dark Souls bosses, beyond their use of being like well-designed like combat encounters. Mostly they are also great sort of like indicators of progress. That this game only having, I think, 2 bosses with health bars, at least that I was able to find, just lacks. Like, I would get to the end of a zone, and usually what happens, like by the design of this game, you will enter a zone, find a crystal, you'll go through a zone, and in the end it will loop back and open a shortcut to the crystal, forming a circle. Or, you know, some other geometric shape that is closed on 2 ends. And what ends up happening with that is just like, I don't know if I'm done or if there's something critical that I'm missing about a place. And it made a lot of places feel pointless is a bad word. I said earlier that like every door that you find usually leads to something significant in one way or another. And so finding that stuff is valuable, and it makes you feel like you're getting better at the game. You get experience points for killing enemies, which allows you to level up and increase your stats and do more stuff. But it did feel like I would be like, I killed like every single enemy in the Sanguine Sea, which is just a vast empty void, and just looked at walls for like places to go, because at the time I didn't feel like I could tackle the tomb in the catacombs and shit. And I didn't know about the forest's existence at all, and was like, well, there's nothing back in the fetid mire, and I don't know how to proceed in the castle because I can't open this door. And so I was just running around in blood for like 30 minutes looking for like something that I missed. And it was like, part of me thinks like that's an intentional part of the game. That they designed it in such a way that every area has like points of interest, but not like critical stuff in it that you have to do to continue with the game. But it was so hard for me to tell the difference between what was critical. I didn't know what my goal was, like what I was pushing toward. So like when it came time, like even when I was having fun with the game, when it came time for me to end it, I didn't know what to do. I was like, where do I go from here? And eventually, you think about like, I knew that there was a big locked door that I hadn't gone through yet. I needed to find a way through. And like, there was this other area that I knew about because of your achievements that I had not been to. Like, so that was something I needed to check out. Like, little clues here and there that led me to the right place eventually. But I did feel very aimless for a lot of it and verging on frustrated.
I guess that makes sense. Yeah, I do think it's concentrated around that middle part of the game where with the big blood lake. Because I definitely like ran around the perimeter as well, being like, there's got to be another location that like branches off from here, right? But like I don't know, I think I kind of fell into like and I hadn't even thought about it, but I guess it was an assumption on my part, like finding your way through the area, like maybe finding one of those like triangle eyeballs that dispels an illusion or whatever, and like finding the shortcut back to the beginning, and then looping back and then like trying to find like an exit door to a new area kind of felt like the substitute for a boss. Like you find the door to the new area and you connect it back to the previous area so you can more easily traverse the world. Like felt like the markers of progression in my head.
That's fair. And yeah, I don't think that the game like needed more bosses or anything. I just think that it needed a more concrete through line. Like, especially like there's a hub world. And if you look at hub worlds canonically in video games, typically if you're stuck, you can go back and there's a bevy of NPCs for you to talk to who may give you clues. And the closest thing that we have to that is Clive, the skeleton, who tells you long stories about things that are interesting to the lore, but are not at all directly related to the progression that you need to make.
Yeah, okay. So tell me if I missed something. But like, does Demi, like the girl who brings you to the hub in the first place, does she have a quest line?
Not that
because I never found it. Like, she would have been the perfect character to provide that.
Agree, yeah.
Because she doesn't do anything, as far as I ever found.
Yeah, and she shows up in a few places, like when you go to find that whatever they called it, like the big furnace in the catacombs, she's there and tells you about death. And if you go to the well's surface area, she's there and will give you crystals so you can warp back. There's like all of these different places where she'll show up that seem like plot significant locations. And then she tells you one thing or gives you an item and then leaves and does not indicate what you should be doing otherwise. So I agree. She seems like such an important character, or the game puts a lot of importance on her, and then she does not end up helping really in any way.
Yeah, I never ever found her in the world even one time.
She's in the room with furnace you turned on. Oh, okay.
Oh, no, she wasn't there for me.
Oh, really?
Yeah,
oh,
like I never, like other than the hub, I never saw her anywhere in the world after the first time.
Oh, interesting. Okay, so maybe there's another trigger for that, and maybe that means that she does have a quest.
Yeah,
because I saw her like 4 or 5 times in total.
Not even once.
Wow. Well, if we're comparing my numbers, because I'm talking about beginning and end of the game, also counting as
So then,
there were a few
twice,
times that you missed her. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So that's interesting. And once again, there are many mysteries of this game that we have yet to unlock. So.
Also,
we'll talk about,
I was just gonna say, because you brought up Clive, I had a moment, and I don't know how obvious this is to the average person, where I'm like, all the stories he's telling are about all the other characters in the hub, which I thought was a really cool thing to like slowly wave over you.
Yeah, and then after you beat the boss, he'll tell you about the knight who shows up at the end, who for me, I was like, who's this guy? I had no idea. And he just like showed up and everybody was just like, and this one, your best friend. Man.
I felt like he had mentioned that character before, but I wasn't 100% sure who he was.
It's possible that I did talk to him since that story became available and didn't recognize it, but good shit. Clive. And much like Clive, we will tell a long rambling story about how we came up in the well after the break. Welcome back. I have a thing to say.
Please do.
Many things. So I mentioned before that I wanted to do a different build than what you were doing, and I wanted to use magic because I had heard that there were things weird about magic in the game. And that is not to say like, I only did like the OP build because I didn't want to do the same thing that Andy did. Like I love magic systems in these fantasy games. It's usually my favorite thing about them. Like they have like it's just a different way of interacting with the world, and I always like experimenting with that stuff. Not that it's not normally my favorite way to play through like a Souls game, but it is always a playthrough that I will do because I want to play around with the other systems and have a good time. And so I went in wanting to do this magic thing, and starting the game, right, they give you a sword, like an old rusty bad sword.
The replica sword, I think, is what it's called.
Yeah. That eventually becomes the heritage sword if you level it up, which is another mechanic we should talk about. And the first spell you get is Flame Spear, which is a spell that costs like 10 MP roughly, and does piss ass no damage, but has a chance to set the enemy on fire, which will usually just kill them if you wait long enough. The result of this starting equipment and my starting class of the witch was that I felt so fucking weak to the point where I was like, should I just start over as a melee class? Because I feel like I am getting utterly bodied. Not even bodied, because that implies that I'm dying. It's more that like I would kill like a enemy and then be completely out of resources and have to fight them with a bad sword and 4 strength points. And so I would very quickly like just start running away from stuff. Now, my question is, what am I correct in thinking that your beginning playthrough was not like that? Or do you also feel weak as melee class?
I mean, I think I did start out feeling weak, but like in like a normal amount. Right, yeah. Surprising nobody, I started as the knight class. And it did feel like I guess I didn't feel weak so much as like you said, like it feels like a real drain on your resources. Like it felt like I would kill an area's worth of enemies and would be like an inch from death. And like have to run back to the crystal. And then I think I like leveled up a few times, like kind of overcame that, and then the game felt like a nice curve for a bit, but then like I hit the forest, which apparently I skipped a few areas there, and I was just like, oh my god, everything is like so fucking hard. And then I eventually found the bow, and then finding a ranged weapon really changed everything.
Okay.
As far as like
that
survivability, like I feel like I can like mostly use a ranged weapon to like explore an area and like not have 0 health potions left and be like, if I don't fucking find a crystal in the next room, I'm fucked.
Right. No, yeah, that sounds right to me. Like I had a ranged option pretty much for the entire game. There were very few times, except for at that very beginning point where I had to rely on actual melee combat. There were a few times when I opted to go for melee combat for fun, to have fun. But it was not often, and it wasn't like a major element of my playthrough. So that's kind of like what what I was most interested in terms of like if I were to do a second playthrough, which I do feel like I probably will at some point in the next year or so. I want to play as the vampire class. That sounds fun to do. It has like an innate ability to like steal health and stuff. So it seems cool for a melee thing. But as the witch, the curve was precipitous. I started out feeling like garbage and not being able to do anything, and this continued. Like I said, I did the Hollow Bastion. That's not right. Hollow Basin, and the Temple of Silence, the Fetid Mire, the fucking Sanguine Sea, and into the castle, without having a fucking idea what I was doing. And I felt like I couldn't be in any location for more than 5 seconds without potentially not being able to do anything for the rest of until I found another crystal. So I was running away from stuff, and I wasn't leveling up very much and all of this, and I felt extremely weak and bad. And then I got to the forest, and I got the blood to spray spell, which allows you to get into the castle proper finally. Right. So I went through that, and I started doing the castle thing, and was, that it's kind of a steep increase if you don't do all of the right things in the right order to go through the castle at that point. So it was kind of a challenge. But I'm slowly leveling up. I'm getting more MP. And eventually I start putting levels into dex. And so now I have a ranged weapon. I use the bow a little bit and the crossbow. And then eventually the crossbow levels up into the double crossbow for a good portion of the game. As I was leveling up my dex and saving my magic for special occasions. Essentially, like near the end of an area, or if there was a really hard enemy, I would use magic on them. And then when I went back to, I went through the Lake of Blood, the Sanguine Sea, did all that, and eventually went to go tackle the catacombs. In the catacombs, I finally leveled up enough and got the lightning spell that I could kill enemies pretty reliably, which allowed me to start leveling up. And because leveling intelligence is so strong, because it provides a lot of benefit. I then just was able to machine gun everything to death with spells in 0 seconds, and win the game with no effort. Like the the difference between playing this game at a low level and feeling like I couldn't do anything to feeling like an unstoppable god was like a 20-minute middle period of ramp up.
Yeah.
Like I was like, this is fine. I'm getting a little bit better. Oh, everything dies in one hit. Or I'm able to just shoot 1,000 rocks at them and they will die before I have to care about it. Like, it was insane, like, how quickly it picked up.
That is wild. Even having, like, quote, skipped some areas and jumped to one that was, like, way harder, I never had, like, that much trouble with combat. Yeah, so I imagine if you played a melee class and went the route you did, it would feel like it had, like, a super smooth difficulty curve.
That does seem possible, yeah. Whereas, like
I was always
the
able
difficulty just dropped off a cliff.
Yeah, I was
for
always
me.
able to reliably kill things and level up throughout the whole game. That also explains why you did the Abyssal Tower so much faster than me. If you leveled your fucking intelligence to 100.
Yeah, I think my intelligence was like, I want to say it might have been at 100 actually when I did that. I forget. But yeah, I had my intelligence really high, and the temple's long, so I couldn't use magic for the entire thing. Well, I could. I think at the end of it, I had 26 mana potions left, so it wasn't like I was starving for them. But like, I couldn't reliably just like what am I thinking? The chimeras. They take 1 mana bar to kill, essentially. And that's just mashing the button to shoot rocks at them. It will kill 1, but it costs like the entire mana bar, and then I would have to use a potion to have it. So it was like, for that I was using other weapons. I'm actually interested. I didn't look any of this up, and I probably should have now before we do the podcast. There are a couple of weapons that I found that I interpreted as ranged weapons, but might have used intelligence for scaling based on just how good they were. And that was the Twisted Staff, and then the fucking Jailer's Candle, which is the weapon I used for the entire end of the game, is insane because it's a light source. That's just always on. It might scale with intelligence, but it doesn't cost mana. It can set people on fire and it deals reasonable damage. Like, it just seemed like such a crazy weapon, and so that's what I mostly used in the tower. Was that? But yeah, the tower posed no challenge to me whatsoever. But at the time that I did it, like, I just dumped on everything.
Yeah.
Which I've read Magic was very good in Kingsfield as well. So maybe that's why they chose to make it Omega broken. But it's definitely not suitable for like a reasonable experience.
Yeah. Yeah, I ended up using like weirdly the Vampire Hunter sword for like a big chunk of the playthrough, because like it can just kill. Like, there's so many enemies that, like, certain weapons don't work on, and the Vampire Hunter sword always works on them. Right. So it ended up being pretty good. And, like, the Elfin Bow I used a lot, because that was, like, my ranged option. And then I got, like, I don't remember the name of the character, if it's, like, Ophelia or something like that. It's, like, a big Zweihander sword. It's, like, the mom of the vampire boss, I think.
Yeah,
in the back.
Ophelia's Blade or something.
Yeah. I used that quite a bit. So those were like kind of my go-tos.
That's fair. Also, as for the Vampire Hunter sword, it's cool. Like, it looked really cool. One of the things that bummed me out a bit is that like spells are just sort of like effects that fire out of your eyeballs at people. Like, there's no personality to them, which is why I really fell in love with the Jailer's Candle, because it had the effect of magic, but also looked cool, like carrying a candle and firing like bolts of fire from it. was a sick, cool experience. But I kept wanting to use the melee weapons because they just all look really good. Like, they have this very sort of, I mean, it's obviously very PS1 styled, but like done in such a good way that like they all had a lot of personality that I really liked.
Yeah.
So I tried to force a few of them to work, and like the Moonlight Greatsword does.
Yeah.
And also costs mana, which was like cool and also bad for me in sort of in a little bit of a way. I had like, at the end of the game, I had like 1600 MP, so it wasn't like a concern, but
yeah, I rarely used magic, so like it took me a while to even notice the Moonlight Greatsword used magic. I never really found like two spells I like used a lot. Like I always had like one, and then was like changing out the other for something else. Like the one that I ended up using a lot was the ice sword. The one that it summons like a floating sword that like fights stuff for you, kind of like the one in Castlevania. That one was pretty good. And then like I would use Coffin once I figured that one out, and I used Lightning a little bit, but that's about it.
I love that. In contrast to me, because I was like the magic class, the ice sword seemed very bad to me, because even though it dealt a lot of damage, it constantly drained your mana.
Right.
So I never wanted to have it out for very long. So I stopped using that. I loved I mean, I guess we can talk about it now, and then I do want to get into the other weapons and stuff, but part of the things, like when people told me like there's wacky stuff with the magic in this game, part of it is lunacy, which is a mechanic that you probably didn't engage with at all.
No, I don't even know what it is. I thought you were just making a play on words.
No, in fact, the developer was making a play on words. But it was lunacy is this system where whenever you go to like cast a spell, it depending on the time of day and the phase of the moon in the real world, it fills a bar which appears on the screen as like a moon icon that starts like as a crescent and then slowly builds into a full moon. And if you fill the bar, you don't even have to fill the bar, but like the more of it you have, it's like the more damage you deal with spells, the more damage you take from enemies. And I think the more XP you get from killing enemies. And it resets whenever you rest at a crystal. So like in order to maximize it, you want to go as long as you can and cast as many spells as you can to do all that stuff. So that is a mechanic that I found didn't like change my decision making at all. Like I never intentionally pushed further than I would want to because I wanted to keep my lunacy up or anything. Like that wasn't like a thing that really like did anything for me. But then the other thing with the magic is just that there's a million spells. And I think that's what most people mean when they talk about it. They're just like, there are a million spells and about 5 of them deal any damage at all.
Right.
And the rest of them are just like wacky bullshit. Like there's a spell you get called lithomancy that says that it brings inanimate objects to life, but all they can do is scream. In my experience, it doesn't do anything at all.
Oh, yeah.
I didn't find a single thing to use it on.
Interesting. I never experimented with it. I wanted to. I like noted that when I saw it, and I was like, I'm going to try that out, and then just forgot. That's weird that it didn't do anything.
Yeah, I tried it on a bunch. I tried it on the golden armor guy. Like, maybe that'll do something. There was like a stone in the church, or not in the castle, that like whispers at you when you get close to it. And says like, cut your face off or something, like edgy shit. Like it's like, but it's like in English, which is weird for this game. And I tried to use the spell on it. It didn't do anything. I'm sure that there's something that you use it on, but I just wasn't able to find it.
Yeah, I just assumed it was like inanimate objects. Like if there's just like a cup on a table.
See, I thought about that too, and the idea that it's like they're screaming, but just internally, and you can't hear them because the cup doesn't have a mouth. But I don't know if that's legit either. I have no idea. So yeah, that's like that one didn't really end up doing anything. Plus there's just tons of other weird magic spells that do wild shit. Like Coffin is the obvious example of one that's actually pretty useful. But I was happy to, when I was in the forest, I was trying to climb up a tree and I didn't have Coffin at the time. So I summoned a snail and then I jumped on top of the snail and jumped up onto the thing.
Nice,
I was like, hey, made use of a spell that I didn't think had a use. Like, that's cool. But that's it. Yeah. I don't know. I wish that they were slightly more damaging spells, like ones that felt viable.
Yeah,
because it felt like they were very rarely worth using.
Yeah. No, it feels like, like there's a lot of like weird spells, but like it feels like almost they should like lean into them in the way that you're describing. Like, sounds like you kept trying to use the make inanimate objects scream spell to like find a secret or like do a cool thing. Whereas like I feel like it might just be a joke. Yeah, I can't say for sure, but like it would be cool if they were like used in like a more interesting way. Like they had like an application.
Right. Yeah, I think to me that was like the big thing was like there were a few things that felt like they were screaming for a use and pun kind of intended, and just never had one. Like it was there are a few spells, like there's a spell that surrounds you in a circle of blue flame, which is pretty cool, and would be useful if combat was, especially for a spellcaster, any less threatening. Or more threatening.
Yeah.
Rather. Like I felt like I was easily able to defeat anything without needing to put up a preventative barrier. Also, the spell Barrier erects an enormous stone wall in front of you, but takes 6 minutes. I'm sure at level 100 probably doesn't take that long to charge. But when I was using it, it was like, why on earth would I ever do this? So I don't know. It was cool. And may still have cool things, but I never really felt like it made the most use of its wackier mechanics.
Right.
So I ended up using 2 spells. It was Lightning and Earth Strike.
Nice.
That's pretty much what I used for most of the game.
I feel less bad about doing that now. Apparently, like I saw in a review that there's like a spell that can make you generate a bridge, which is like another like spell that supposedly like breaks the game wide open. You can use it to get to like weird places.
That actually does sound pretty sick. I know there's also one that's called like Icarian Flight or something that makes you jump real high, which also seems like it would break the game in a good way.
Yeah.
So, Coffin, whatever the bridge spell is, and then the jump spell.
Yeah.
Those seem like A+ traversal spells.
So I've got a topic conversation, and you got to tell me if I'm crazy or weird. Because there's a lot of Dark Souls inspired games, and they all seem to like use the like bonfire system, much like this game does. Like you have a checkpoint where you can level up at it. I don't understand why more of them don't try to use an Estus system. Because in my opinion, it's always better than a health potion system, like where you have to buy them and or find pickups in the world. Is that a weird opinion to hold? It feels like it sometimes. Like Hyper Light Drifter is a game I think would have been better with an Estus system. This game I also think would have been better if it had Estus and not potions you had to buy.
Yeah, I think we had this conversation, not at all this conversation. We had a conversation on the Mario 64 episode. Trust, go on this journey with me. Where we talk about the hub world, the castle in Mario 64, and how it feels like people aren't really trying to do the same thing iteratively.
Right.
And I think that sort of the conclusion we came to is that people get the sense that they shouldn't, because like don't want to just be seen as copying Mario 64.
Right.
And it's funny to me because there's so many games that are so obviously, very blatantly copying Dark Souls, and then don't use the Estus system because like that's a bridge too far.
Yeah.
And I think I mean you're right. It is like one of the most objectively well thought out like healing systems in video games ever. Like if you have a game where you travel checkpoint to checkpoint, and that's the whole point, you are allowed so much control over your design by just implementing the system that restricts how the player can heal.
Yeah.
You pretty much can make it exactly as hard as you want it to be.
Right, because you
by
know how
doing
much
this.
healing the player has. Like
Exactly.
it makes it so much easier. Like you don't have to like consider where to place, like how much health to place in the level, how expensive to make health potions, like when's the player gonna need it. Is like this part's hard, I gotta put health pack right here. You know, like you don't have to do any of that. You just like, you know, boom, they have 5 or 10 or however many potions, and they have it every time, and you just don't. It seems not just a better system, but like easier to design for. It just seems better in every way.
Yeah, it's extremely strange. And like you had this exact experience where in this game you felt more comfortable at low level, like before you're like capable in combat in the way that you are at higher levels. Like you're more comfortable just running away from an enemy and looking for the crystal than engaging because the potions feel like they have a very high value.
And yeah, money's hard to come by early on.
Yeah. And so later in the game, the exact opposite is true, because now you haven't bought any potions. You've been hoarding potions. You now have hundreds of potions, and nothing feels like a challenge anymore because 1, you're more capable, and 2, you can just down health potions if you ever get into trouble.
Right.
So it's weird. Like it does feel like it is actively harming the game's difficulty curve by not using like a renewable health system.
Well, I'm glad you agree. It's one of those things sometimes where it feels like I'm taking crazy pills.
No,
It's like,
yeah,
why aren't people
like,
copying this part?
It's because like whenever I would pick up those like health and mana restoration items, like the earth and ocean
Elixirs.
elixir, there it is, that increase your maximum health, I would just keep them on my hotbar. And I would use those in place of a potion. So I'd let my health get low, then use that. Then it fills it up and uses the thing. And at the end of the game, I just had like 3 of the MP ones like in my inventory that I never used because I was like, well, I won't use a flask here. I'll just go back to the crystal or whatever.
Right.
Or I'll rely on my ranged weapon instead of magic or to save mana. And it just having this health system and mana system, like this consumable system, makes the player more likely to hoard,
right,
rather than engage in your mechanics. And
players are
that's
already
always a little sketchy.
Yeah, players are already prone to doing that. Like it's like a meme, like, oh, I finished the game with like 83 ethers in my inventory or whatever, because I never wanted to use them.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Speaking of those elixirs, though, did you ever notice there's one in the hub, like up on some rafters that you can jump up to? I thought genius.
It's pretty late when I found it.
Oh yeah, I found it. I noticed it pretty early, and hadn't really been putting points into decks because I hadn't like had a use for it up till that point. But I thought that was a great piece of design because it made me want to put points in decks so I could jump up and get it.
That's true. That's a good point. If I was more observant, which as we know, I am not.
Yeah.
I probably would have had that thought. But in this case, I just went, oh, I dumped some coffins on the ground and then I jumped up and got it. Like it was pretty far in before I found it.
Yeah. Kind of a random thing that doesn't relate to anything else. But there's an NPC that's like a forest nymph in the forest area. She's like green and she has like antlers and stuff. Did you find her?
That sounds cool.
Oh, okay. Well, then, damn. Because she had a quest line that I never progressed. She gave me a key. She was like, go back up through the level or whatever, and there will be like a magic door. Like, there's the one early on you have to use a key on. There's like a door with like an eyeball on it or whatever. She's like, you'll find one of those. She gives you a key. It's like, go find this skull and bring it back to me. Never found that door. Like, I went around looking for it, and I'm like, I can't find this. So
I did find the door.
Oh, yeah?
But never found a way to get into it because I didn't have the key.
Well, there you go.
A real gift of the Magi situation.
Yeah, where was it? Like, I could not find that door.
Thinking back on it now, I don't remember.
Yeah.
It was like from now, which is at the end of the game, it was like 6 hours before that. So
I was wondering what happened.
Like 3 real world days.
Yeah.
Well, there's another character who you wouldn't have met who's like this guy. He looks kind of like Spike from Splatoon.
Okay.
Like he's like a lanky guy in a big coat with like a spiky, weird anime hair. And he has like his hands are just like black with ink. And he's in the library. And if you bring him these books that are like, I found one of them. There's apparently 3. There are books that are soaked in ink that are just like all black. And if you bring them to him, he will decipher them and then give you a spell. So I got one of those, and have zero fucking idea where the other ones could even possibly be. Cause they're just like small collectibles that you'll find somewhere in existence. And I don't know how to get to them.
Yeah. I don't know.
So
if I
similar
found
to the key thing, like, I don't know if I would be able to even find her now if I went back.
Yeah. Oh, one thing that you mentioned that we never talked about was leveling up the weapons.
I love it.
I never did it. I apparently switched to special weapons that don't level up often enough that every time I went over to it, it was like, this doesn't work on like your weapon or whatever. Every single time I looked at it.
Yeah, so the weapons that can level up have an XP bar.
Yeah.
So
I learned this
later. That was so motivating for me because, and I think it's because of my rough start. I was so weak, and then I leveled up the sword into the heritage sword, and it was such an increase in power. Even though I wasn't a melee class, I had no points in strength. The fact that my like fallback, I have no magic option was now dealing real damage. Made me always have a warm spot in my heart for it. So whenever I saw a weapon that had an XP bar, I would genuinely consider using it to level it up, even though I knew that I wasn't going to use it. Like, I sent you a screenshot of a big pile of coffins floating in nothing. And that weapon I'm using is a weapon that I was just using to level up. It's a dagger that deals dark damage. So when I hit something with it, it dealt like 1 damage. But I still wanted to level up just to see what it did.
Yeah.
It's part of the reason I want to do another playthrough as a melee character, because there are so many melee weapons that level up. And from what I found, there was 1 ranged weapon that did.
Yeah.
But I goddamn did level it up, though.
Yeah, Elfin Bow and Vampire Hunter Sword don't level up. Neither does the Blade of Ophelia. I kept finding, like, I went from the replica sword to, like, a metal spear or something. Like, I don't know if I got lucky. I just kept finding weapons that were like twice as powerful as what I was using and just started using those. So I was just constantly switching weapons, and then the ones I like settled on were all like special weapons that don't level up. So like I literally never went to that oil and was able to interact with it. So I had no idea what it did until I watched a review. I was like, oh.
I found it to be a really compelling system, but like I also get that like the weapons that I settled on at the end of the game, that were not machine gun of boulders and a lightning bolt, were the jailer's candle, which doesn't level up and is just a candle. Though I think it is kind of busted because it's also a light source. But then also the crossbow, which did level up, whatever. ended up getting replaced with like Moonlight, which dealt actually good damage for a melee weapon, so I liked having it around to give me that option. And that doesn't level up either. Like a lot of the weapons that are enticing and cool don't.
Right.
I will say there are 2 hidden weapons in the last area that I did actually find both of. One of them is that obsidian dagger, or the obsidian seal, or whatever it's called. And when you level that up, it becomes like this huge, like, guts ass greatsword.
Yeah.
And then the other one is like, which I didn't level up, but am tempted to, is a katana that when you're using it, you just have the blindness effect at all times.
Oh, that's
so everything is super dark. And I presume when you level it up, it doesn't do that. Or maybe it does. That would also be cool, honestly. But yeah, there's a lot of stuff that see, like, those are weapons that both seem cool and also level up. But there are also a million weapons that you'll find that are cool and don't level up because they are like a specific thing.
Yeah, it's kind of like boss weapons in the Souls games, where like only level to +5 or whatever. Yeah, I think I just got unlucky.
A bit, yeah.
Or depending on how you look at it, I guess just lucky because I just found good weapons.
Yeah, you didn't have to worry about leveling them up.
Yeah.
It doesn't take... That's, I think, the master stroke with it. Because, like, ideally, for me, the way that I would have wanted is every weapon to level up once.
Yeah.
Like, just as, like, a cool thing. And then maybe there'll be, like, one weapon that levels up twice and is a legendary blade or some shit.
Right. Of a Memnon?
The legendary blade of a Memnon, obviously. But the way that the system is implemented, the ones that do level up, it really doesn't take that long to level them up if you're actively using them. So you get to sort of like play around with a lot of things. And if you're somebody like me, like that's really appealing. And does make me regret not doing a melee build a little bit.
Yeah, I think you'd have a good time if you ever get the chance.
Yeah. Pseudo Regalia is short. Maybe I'll be able to sneak a little bit of it in.
One thing, I don't know if you... this took me a embarrassingly long time to figure out. To block, you don't have to hold down the click. You can just click, and it's like a toggle.
Yeah.
Because like I would always want to hold... Like I ended up just not blocking like ever, because I would want to hold the button. If you do, it can like cause like lag where he like doesn't put the sword up very fast. So I was just like, blocking sucks. And then it was like halfway through the game before I realized I was just doing it wrong.
Right. I also, I think, was like halfway through the game before I figured that out. But then also most of the weapons I used couldn't block.
Yeah, I figured.
Like, yeah, you can't block with a candle. You couldn't block with the staff, which are the weapons I used a lot. The bow. You get a gun.
I saw that later.
Yeah.
I didn't find it.
It's awful.
Yeah.
You have to free the golden armor, and then she sells it in the shop.
Oh, right. I just never bought it. I knew I like saw it, but then just didn't get it.
Right. Yeah, it's like it's like $120 or something. I was like, oh, cool. It's like a gun. That's kind of funny. Let's try that. And it takes like 100 years to use. I used it on the because it deals dark damage. So enemies that are immune to like mundane damage will take damage from it. So I tried it on like the phantasms that float around outside the castle, who I could easily one-shot with like any spell that I had.
Right.
And it was like 3/4 of their health. And I was like, no, I'm not using this bad gun just because it's funny. I do have some thoughts. I have 2 thoughts.
Okay.
Remaining.
Sure.
And then I will die. There is do you want to talk more about mechanics, or do you want to veer into a completely different direction?
I mean, might as well finish out mechanics first.
I guess that's fair. I found the stat distribution in this game to be kind of weird. And I don't know how you prioritized stats in leveling, but I was thinking of like if I was playing with strength, I feel like I still would not put any points in defense at all.
Yeah. I started out kind of just doing what I would do in a Souls game, where I was just like, strength, endurance, health uh, for a long time, and then like slowly became a buffet character where I was like, well, they're all useful. That's one thing I think is interesting. Because like resistance is like the status effects are like pretty punishing. So I was like, I'll pump a few points into that. Like I want to be able to run faster. I want to be able to jump higher. So I'll put points in that. Like I did use magic sometimes. So I'm like, I've got to put a couple points in intelligence. Like, so early on I prioritized like a build, and then over time I was just like, well, I've already got like 60 strength, so like I'll put points in something else.
Yeah, I mean that's kind of what happened with me as well. But like, yeah, I think that makes sense. The defense stat is the one that I think is probably the weakest. In terms of,
I
like,
forgot
actually
that
leveling.
it exists. So
Yeah, because it makes it so that you don't get guard broken for more time. But like, I wasn't blocking, so I didn't even think about it. So I don't really know how effective that is with strength. But like, I was like, if I was playing strength, I still feel like I would put a bunch of points into speed and into dex. And if you're playing a dex character, because like there are 3 damaging stats. There's strength for melee weapons, dex for ranged weapons, and then int for spells. And if I'm playing any of them, I'm still going to be leveling dex for the jump height. I'm still going to be leveling speed for the movement speed. And there's even an argument that I might put a couple of points into intelligence just for spells to charge faster. But the defense is weird. Like, it feels like every character is going to be a TMTM buffet character at some point.
right.
Like, you just got to put, like, resistance is broadly useful as well, in a way that resistance is not in Dark Souls.
Right.
And so it was an interesting thing that I was unsure about. But you also get a lot of points, so like maybe it doesn't matter so much.
Yeah.
I don't know. But yeah, that was pretty much all I had to say about stats.
Yeah.
Just felt kind of like it felt I guess good that they all seemed useful, but also weird.
Yeah, it is.
I guess it didn't feel like I was specializing as much.
Yeah, it does. It is balanced weird.
My other thing was what I think is the biggest thing that we haven't talked about, aesthetics. This game has a very specific style, kind of. I feel like it walks a line. This is the element of the game that I am the most divided on. Some of the levels are fucking masterpiece level Van Gogh ass paintings of just delicious, good, like level aesthetics. I love the forest. I love the Sanguine Sea. These all look very cool to be in. I think the prison does a very good job of sort of like causing that claustrophobia. And then there are other levels that feel like you're walking in the same place and seeing nothing new or interesting for like an hour or more. Which would be like the catacombs and the mausoleum and the library, which is cool when you walk in because there's like pages flying all over the place and all these bookshelves, and some of them are curvy and weird. But it just like doesn't change enough as you walk through it and doesn't feel like that exciting of a thing.
Yeah. I don't know if that's just like a product of its indie game-ness, like just not having as much of a budget for unique stuff, or if it's just trying to be super faithful to the games it's based on. Because I imagine that's like what a PS2 dungeon crawler would be like, just kind of like stone hallways.
Yeah, this kind of harks back to what I said at the beginning, where it's like some of the things that I'm going to criticize may have been done intentionally. Like,
right.
Parts of these are definitely like there specifically to make the game feel more like Kingsfield or feel more like Shadow Tower. But yeah, I don't know. It's weird because when they really flex and like do a cool area, it fucking rips. Like, it looks really good.
Yeah.
And so it feels disappointing, especially in levels like the catacombs. You have to spend so much time in to actually find all of the stuff in them. To just be walking through plain gray corridors for so long is kind of a bummer.
Yeah. Now, I do love the aesthetic of it, though. Maybe, like, the best, like, PS1 throwback art style, at least I can think of off the top of my head.
Yeah, like, I want to shout out the Bloodborne PS1 remake, but it is so because it is in itself literally making versions of existing things. The fact that Lunacid is making new like aesthetic decisions in order to build its own world pushes it above, but I would put them kind of on par with like how just technically good they look.
Yeah. Like, I don't remember the way Bloodborne PSX looks super well. I don't know if I'm imagining it correctly or not. Like, I feel like it feels a lot more like authentically PS1, so AKA a little bit worse.
Right. Yeah.
Whereas this, like, I feel like it pulls that like Shovel Knight hat trick, where it like it feels like it looks very authentically PlayStation 1, but actually like looks a lot better than a PlayStation 1 game. It's just like nailing like a modernized version of the aesthetic really well.
Also, just like the UI and the menu design.
Oh god,
feels
it's so
very
good.
Yeah.
The menu, especially like you mentioned it up top, and I just completely forgot to comment on it. But like the opening cutscene, like there's so much about like the tone and like the vibe. It's like just nailing that like PS2 era or PS1 era feel like so well. Yeah, and the UI design I think is incredible for like what it's going for.
Yeah, I love that the like character creator just gives you like a portrait to choose from. So obviously I went with the skeleton that's wearing like a cloth hood. It was always very funny to just see that, and then my name just being Nup, and it
You can
it just felt very silly and funny.
Yeah, you apparently can upload a picture, which I did not do. I picked a knight character. I didn't want to just use the one that's just like a knight helmet, so I picked another one that's like a guy with like a more helmet with the exposed face.
Oh yeah.
I don't know if you remember that one, but I went with that one. It felt like it had more personality, you know.
No, yeah, I agree. That's kind of like the choice that I made too. Like there were a lot of options and there are a lot of options like for a lot of different people, right? Like some people would want to just see the knight helmet because it is like a concrete reminder, like that is the character I'm playing. It's a sturdy, valiant knight.
Yeah, classic imagery.
Yeah. And I want to see a funny skeleton every time that I open the menu. Very silly thing that I like. So that was cool. Yeah, the rest of the UI is very good. The sound effects are spot on.
And the music slaps.
I would have preferred it if it was totally quiet except for the sound of your footsteps. Obviously. But the music is extremely good, yeah.
Yeah, another Tunic comparison, but like I feel like it nails this like fusion of like catchy video game music, lo-fi hip hop beats, and like atmospheric ambiance.
The fact that Wings Rest, like the hub world theme, is a lo-fi hip-hop beat to study to took me so by surprise. Like I had no fucking idea that that's what I was gonna get into. And the music for the Forbidden Archive, which I will implore you to look up later to listen to, is like legit like a top 10 like very good lo-fi song, and just feels extremely like weird to walk in and hear, because it's like the way that you like, I don't know, everything leading up to it is not that, and then you get there and it is, and you're like, damn.
Yeah.
This really hits the spot for some reason.
Yeah, like the Wings Rest theme almost kind of reminded me of like there's this theme in Kingdom Hearts 2 in like the data fight area. Uh, it kind of felt like a cross between that and like something off of like the Danganronpa soundtrack.
And like the non-lo-fi stuff is also really good.
Yeah.
Some of it nailing that like old melodic stuff, and other songs on the soundtrack being like the cheesy like Castlevania synthesized organ sounds. So like it hit a lot of different places with the art or with the music. But I think most of them were done appropriately, and also just the songs are good. They're just good songs.
Yeah.
And I like that it attributes like the artist and the name of the song whenever you enter an area. I think the song that plays, I want to say it's like right before the final boss, is a song that's just called "Me When the Harps Are Chord." Which is like, I love that some of the songs just have joke titles.
Yeah. Yeah, like, I feel like so many of the songs are just attributed to the developer.
True.
Yeah, like I kind of just started tuning it out, so.
I
did
mean,
not
it's not like I
notice
have
that.
an encyclopedic knowledge
Yeah.
of all of these things. It's just like, I like that it's there.
Yeah. Me too. I did not notice any joke song titles personally.
Also, so just to complete the trilogy of things that we talk about at the end of the podcast. What did you think about the actual like character design, like the NPCs? Because I just felt they felt kind of out of place, especially in comparison to the fact that like it's not they were too high fidelity or something, because most of the enemies are like pretty high fidelity models. Like they did a good job of designing the enemies and stuff and the worlds, and it felt like you said both authentically PS1 while also looking better than the PS1 was actually capable of. And then Demi is just like a magical girl anime character.
Yeah. No, I think they all look great except for the ones that are like anime girls. Like Uri Demi and that forest nymph and etc. Yeah, it feels very out of place to me.
It's just strange, yeah. And I mean, even like to me, like even like Cheryl and the Black Mage.
The Black Mage just feel very Final Fantasy-y. But like I don't know, I feel like that fit for me personally.
That's fair. I mean, it definitely fits more
Yeah.
than like the random anime character. But it just feels strange. Like the NPCs to me just felt like they were transplanted from a different game into this one in most situations. Even the final boss of the game looks really weird, but like even like a guy with a crocodile for a head feels more in place than Demi does.
Yeah, agreed.
I don't know if you had anything else.
I
don't want to like dominate.
No,
the
not
end of
really.
the podcast here.
The only thing we hit most of my stuff early. The only other thing I wanted to bring up, but I feel like we covered it well enough already, which is like you have like a favorite area or anything, but I feel like we've talked about areas plenty.
Yeah, I kind of agree with that we did sort of cover it. I do want to mention, just to close it out, in the way that games traditionally close it out, there are two bosses in this game. There's a vampire man, and there's the aforementioned crocodile head man.
Right.
How did these bosses feel to you? Were there any surprises with them? Did you find the final boss to be difficult because you did not have a machine gun loaded with boulders? Because I suspected that I sort of trivialized it, but I don't know.
I think the bosses came late enough in the game that they weren't that hard. Especially like I had the ice sword, so like if I was having trouble, I could just summon that and run away, and it would kill the boss. Basically, that worked pretty well against the vampire. If he ever overwhelmed me. The final boss, though, I did fight like right when I got to it because I went there before I went to the Boiling Grotto. So I fought him once, and he totally bodied me, like destroyed me. Then I went and leveled up more and got the Moonlight Sword, which helps tremendously with that fight. So when I've actually fought him the second time, it was like pretty easy.
Okay. Yeah, I felt very bad going into the final boss. First of all, the vampire boss, just as a thing, because I'm assuming that this didn't happen to you. I went in to fight him. I described my curve, right? Like, incredibly difficult, couldn't kill anything, suddenly the strongest being in existence. I fought that boss when I was like on the up, but before I could consider myself a god. And I was still using flame spear, and I would like set him on fire and then run around while he burned, and then I would set him on fire again and then rinse repeat over and over again to drain his health. And I was like, he didn't hit me, and then it was like second phase, and I was like, ooh, bet the second phase is going to be harder and he'll hit me. Incorrect. I continued to set him on fire and run away, and he never hit me at all. And then he entered a third phase where he turns into a big werewolf and kills me in one hit. And it was 2 hits. But he just like sprinted at me and chomped on me, and I died. And I was like, how the fuck do you beat the werewolf phase? Because it seems way too hard, considering that the first phase took me like 40 minutes. Probably not, like more like 20 minutes, but actually that time. Of me just running around. He never hit me. It's like the worst designed boss in the world. It's really boring, and then it's impossibly hard after a really long time commitment. And so I went and did a bunch of other stuff for like a million years, and then I became a god, as I mentioned, and I came back and I started hitting him with the lightning bolts, and he hit me a couple of times. I tried to hit him with a melee attack because I had like a blade of something of his dad, and I was like, oh, maybe that does bonus damage to him for lore reasons, and it didn't, and so he actually did hit me, and then I went back to my old ways and shot him with lightning bolts instead of the flame spear, and then he just died. So I think that the werewolf thing only happens if you take a really long time on the fight.
Yeah, he never turned into a werewolf for me.
That's good. That's, to me, is confirmation of my theory.
I don't know if that's because I used the vampire hunter sword on him, though. Maybe. I think it's possible. Like made of silver, which would make sense, right?
Yeah. Vampires and all that.
Well, werewolves.
Also, just like weirdly every mythological being in silver apparently don't get along. But yeah, that was an extremely weird experience because I was able to come back and just destroy the fuck out of him. Not that long after, like I wasn't that much higher in level, but just the fact that I wasn't waiting for so long means that he didn't get an invincible third phase that murders
Maybe you fought him on a full moon.
Oh, that's probably what it was.
That would be pretty awesome, actually.
Yeah. And I like the final boss, but the final boss does feel like it's an enormous step up in difficulty from literally any other thing in the game. He's really fast. He doesn't do like absurd damage, but like he does enough damage that you have to worry. And he's just always on your ass. Like there's nothing, I can't imagine right now fighting that guy as a melee character. But I walked in and just pummeled him with rocks and he died. Like it was not that much of a challenge. So
I basically just had to like always be running and then just fire off sword beams from the Moonlight Sword at him, which does pretty good damage on him. And also I was summoning the sword, and so I went in with like a bunch of mana potions, so I just never had to worry about how much magic I had. So between the sword, the two magical swords, deal with him pretty well.
That's fair, yeah.
Flame spear.
Do we do we have flame spear soon to be replaced with earth strike thoughts?
My flame spear thoughts are this game fucking rules. Such a pleasant surprise. Like I already thought I was gonna like it, but like I just like delivered on all the things I wanted, and then also had like the cool, weird vaporwave, menus and like cool music, and like I just really enjoyed playing this game. Uh yeah, it's just one of those games I think like I just like enjoyed so much that like even though, we're playing it for this podcast and I talk about it critically, like I kind of just don't care about its flaws. There are a few things that are a little bit too cryptic that like I wish wouldn't drive 99% of players to Google to figure out. That would probably be the biggest thing. But I do like that it goes for secrets and really makes them feel secret and does deliver on that kind of like old game mystery and crypticness. I think it delivers on that really well. In like a different kind of way. Like I don't know if it's just because I haven't played a dungeon crawler, it felt like especially fresh. But like yeah, I really enjoyed my time with it. And yeah, I could think maybe like I never found a quest line for Demi. If it's in there, cool. If not, like maybe that could be a thing to add in an update or something. And yeah, I don't know. Like I just really enjoyed my time with this. Like I don't really have any complaints. Like for a solo indie dev, like I feel like the scope and the scale and everything was handled like pretty perfectly. This really feels like a complete satisfying package that I had a great time with.
God damn it, that's such a good fucking point that you made about driving people to Google that I never considered. That there's definitely like for a large swath of people, there is a threshold that you can make the game mysterious and cryptic and provide clues to things that may require more effort to figure out, that you can include before that player will then go Google the game and then probably find out too much information, which is what happened to me, right? Like I started the game, wasn't looking anything up, wasn't doing anything to like prepare myself. I went in blind. I played for a long time. I felt weak. I started to power up. I felt strong. And then like something came up and I Googled something, and then someone on a forum was like, it is basically like the most overpowered stat in the game and you're having a very easy time if you level it. And I was like, damn it. Like I didn't know how it shook out like in the grand scheme before I looked it up. But that's an interesting thing to think about. Like, there is like you could definitely make a game that is like just cryptic enough, but with the main path not obscured so heavily that anyone would actually go Google it, or at least like that middle portion, the grand majority would not immediately go Google, and you have their minds free and clear for you to massage and palpitate. Anyway, I agree with the rest of what you said also. This game fucking rules. I like immediately upon like getting to like the halfway point in the game was like the Souls people, in your phone you have the contact list that's like, these are the Souls guys that you play Souls games and talk about them. I was like, go fucking play this game. It rules. I did almost the same thing with Tunic, where I was like, Tunic's like the best Dark Souls game since Dark Souls 1. I think this game sort of falls into the same category. Like, if you play Souls games for the reasons that Andy and I largely play Souls games, which is like, they have this emphasis on exploration and sort of player expression and all of these cool, mysterious things about them that is fun to explore and learn about. This game is like a distillation of that stuff. The combat is not unfun, but it isn't really anything to write home about. It's more about the world. It's about the atmosphere. It's about all of these ancillary things that come together and make this game fucking really cool. And just as a closing note, there are a lot of Souls games. Iron Pineapple has talked about like 100 of them in the last year. This is a exploding genre that just seems to get more popular every day. And most of those games are these like, if they are like big budget games that claim to be Souls games, are going to be like a 40 to 100 hour action RPG that has all of this finicky bullshit in and is a Souls-like because you roll and there's a lot of stats and weapons to pick up and it's like an open world game. This game is such a good example of how you can pack all of the cool world building and level design and like cyclical structures that lead back into places with shortcuts to your checkpoints and the cool level design stuff that Dark Souls 1 got really right in a reasonably short time. This is like a 16-ish, 14, 16-hour game, which I think is a reasonable length for a game like this. And I think other games of a similar scale could really learn from how well this game does at it. This game fucking is a bop. It's a real good time.
Fuck yeah.
Fuck yeah. Thank you for listening to No Clip this week.
What are we talking about next time?
Next time, as alluded to already in the episode, we're going to be talking about Lies of P, a big budget 60 to 100 hour RPG, action RPG.
I think it's only supposed to be 30 hours.
Yeah, that one's actually not super long, so I've just already I've pantsed myself. What an embarrassment!
But it is twice as long as this game.
That's true. It made waves. If you're in my contact list as a Souls boy, you definitely already know and probably have already played it. With weird Pinocchio theme.
And we will get very deep into that next time.
But until that time, you can get a hold of us. All of our contact information is on our website at noclippodcast.com or on splattershot.pro, where you can find links to our email address, our Twitter account, the YouTube channel. You can check out all of our old episodes, including ones that we did on Elden Ring.
Bloodborne.
Or Bloodborne.
Dark Souls
or
1.
Tunic,
yeah. Tunic, Hollow Knight, things like that, I think, are more spiritually similar.
Yeah, I would agree. I think that's true. Xenoblade Chronicles 3 has a reference to Bloodborne in it.
Hyper Light Drifter also has a reference to Bloodborne.
That is true.
God of War also has a reference to Bloodborne.
These are all games that are not Souls-likes. Some of them are. But are tangentially related enough for me to mention right now.
Cast a pile of coffins to climb up and hit that like button.
Fully charge your attack to decapitate the subscribe button.
And warp back to Wing's Rest to have a discussion with Clive in the comment section.
In the comment section.
Da-da-da-da-da.
It's sort of Soulsian in the
Really exposes the difficulty of relationships.
Yeah, is Breakfast at Tiffany's the movie that is least likely to be compared to Dark Souls?
It's one of them.